Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to English with Shalini. In this today's video, we will discuss about university wits. Who were they? The university wits is a phrase which was used to name a group of late 16th century English playwrights, Elizabethan playwrights, dramatists, and pamphleteers who were educated at the universities of either Oxford or Cambridge and who became popular secular writers of Elizabethan age. And the term was not used during Elizabethan period. They didn't know that they belonged to university wits, these writers. But later on, in 19th century, a journalist and author George Santbury, you can see the picture. He coined this word university wits, and he said that these writers were university wits, university scholars, intelligent people from universities. So, who were they? John Lilly, George Peele, Robert Greene, Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Kidd, Thomas Nash, and Thomas Lodge. Now, Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, and Thomas Nash were educated from Cambridge, and John Lilly, Thomas Lodge, and George Peele were educated from Oxford. Then there is one exception, who is Thomas Kidd. He he has not been graduated from any of these university or any other universities. He was not a university graduate, but he is still included in this group because his writing style was like that. His writing style was like these university wits. So these diverse and talented London writers and dramatists set the stage for theatrical renaissance of Elizabethan period. And university wits were brilliant writers before William Shakespeare. But when Shakespeare came, they heavily overshadowed by the extraordinary genius of William Shakespeare. Now, this term was coined by George Santbury, and these writers came to prominence and dominance in 1580s. Thus, they established real drama. Before University Wits, there were not a much good drama was there. Chronicle plays was being written, historical play was being written, morality plays, miracle plays. Actually, these were the not real plays in actuality, but real drama started with university wits and with these university graduates. Now, they are identified as among the earliest professional writers in English. They were the writers who made drama writing as their profession, and they prepared the way for writings of William Shakespeare, who was born just 2 months after Marlowe. Now, they were called immediate predecessors of Shakespeare. University wits were the group of Oxford and Cambridge University scholars who came to London to try their luck as a professional playwrights and dramatists and pamphleteers immediately before Shakespeare. And it was the earliest stage of development of dramas at that time as a popular means of entertainment in public theatres and playhouses. Now, these scholars wrote plays for common public and they were acted in the public playhouses. So, these were these writers, John Lilly, George Peele, Robert Greene, and all those. Now, Robert Greene was a writer who has written Groat Worth of Wit. He was a pamphleteer, and in that he has compared Shakespeare with upstart crow. So he has criticized Shakespeare in that. And the leader of the university wits was John Lilly, but the most powerful of them was Marlowe. So, John Lilly, first of all, we will talk about John Lilly. He chose theme for his plays from classical deities, and they were writing about the heroic themes. All these university wits were writing about the heroic themes and heroic subjects, and they were since they were very educated and elite gentry, they ridiculed other persons and other writers who were not university graduates or any not much learned. Now, They were known to be contemporaries. All these writers were contemporaries. They collaborated with each other, they helped each other, they were friends. And so they moved to London from their cities and small towns to pursue literary arts, theaters, writing. And their style was they were writing pamphlets also, they were writing dramas also. In pamphlets they were very controversial writings, and they were argumentative pamphlets, an early form of journalism. So what is pamphlets? You can say that it was the early form of journalism. Hence, these writers were trained in classics. They were very much trained in works of Greek writers and Roman writers. So, all these writers were very much dear to them. Now, although they were very much learned, they responded to the taste of the audience. They knew what audience want. Elizabethan audience wanted entertainment, and they catered entertainment to them. So they made the public place literary without making them academics. So all they were writing public place. They did not made that place academic. So they used they put so much acumen in these dramas that it was very entertaining. Now their range were very broad. They were writing on many subjects. And now, what are the common elements in these plays of these university wits? So, according to the critic Edward Albert's criticism, these writers had some common features, some common literary features. And what were those common features expounded by Edward Alberts? That they were fondness for the heroic theme. They liked heroic theme. They used heroic theme in their dramas, and they were writing about the great figures. They were writing about warriors and war and bloody battle, violence. And Elizabethan audience liked these things very much. And they were, since they were writing upon the heroic theme, their treatment was also heroic. It was very in a grand style, and there was a fullness and variety, and there was long speeches, spectacles, violence. And this spectacle often lead to loudness and disorder. So sometimes they failed in their drama, sometimes they made their dramas very bombastic. But they can be excused for that because they were pioneers in this field. And then their style was heroic style. They were using magnificent epithets, powerful declamations, strong and sounding lines. And this also added to the abuse, bombast, mounting, and the nonsense. So there was a predominance of tragedy in them. They liked tragedy very much. They did not like comedy. Comedy was considered to by them like a lower species. They said that comedy is not so powerful and not so good as a field in the as a dramatic genre. Now, one thing was there, they lacked general humor. Their writings lacked humor. They were not able to present humor in a proper way. Only the person whose name was John Lilly, dramatist, he was only using comedy for his plays. Otherwise all people were writing in a tragic way. They were all writing tragedies. Now we will discuss about John Lilly first. John Lilly here. So he was a great university wit, John Lilly, and his important plays are a most excellent comedy of Alexander, Compass, Diagnosis, Sappho, Phao, Endymion, The Man on the Moon, Galathea, Midas, The Woman in the Moon, and The Love's Metamorphosis. So all are his plays, and he was also writing comedies. And Sampson says Lilly was the first master of prose style in English comedy. And but he was a great writer, but he was the most neglected and unappreciated and misunderstood Elizabethan playwright. And he has written some 7 to 8 comedies like Alexander, Compass, Endymion, Galathea, Sappho and Pao, Midas, Woman in the Moon, all those. and these were written and performed in court of Queen Elizabeth, and they were performed for the private audience and the court. He was writing plays for the private playhouses. In Elizabethan age, there were two kind of playhouses. One was a public playhouse, other was private playhouse. In private playhouses, common people are not going there because it was very costly. And private playhouse was attended by rich person, aristocratic persons. So so he rendered this John Lilly rendered provided a intellectual tone to comedy. He was using clever repartee, continual use of puns, conceit. He was using, and he was using all sorts of verbal fireworks. So in his dramas, Shakespeare was created. So we can say reflections of Shakespeare in his dramas. Shakespeare learned very much from that John Lilly. So he was writing upon the themes of culture, upbringing, manners, and the class, and central to our understanding of Elizabethan age. His themes were generosity, sacrifice, and friendship over love. So Hudson, a critic, says that undeniably Shakespeare, he was the Shakespeare first master. He was called Shakespeare first master, John Lilly. Now we will talk about George Peele. So George Peele is a great writer, again great writer, and we will discuss George Peele. So George Peele was also a very we can include him in the university wits. He was a great writer, and he has his plays are like this, and he was graduated from the University of Oxford, and his plays are Arrangement of Paris, a pastoral, famous chronicles of King the First, Battle of Alcazar, the Old Wife's Tale, and the Love of the King David and Fairy Bathsheba. Now, this Old Wife Tale inspired Shakespeare to write his Winter Tales. So, all these university wits inspired Shakespeare to write some play or the other, and some people also helped Shakespeare to write his plays. Shakespeare learned dramatic technique from them, tragedy from them, and all those things. Now, this George Peele handled blank verse in a very good way, and he has much variety in this. And he has collaborated with Shakespeare in Titus Andronicus. He has collaborated Shakespeare in his play Titus Andronicus, which is very important point to remember. And he has written Chronicle of Edward First also, and it was a model for Shakespeare historical plays. Shakespeare has written many historical plays. So this famous Chronicle of King Edward the First, Shakespeare was inspired by this to write his historical plays. Now, though Peele's dramatic career was very short, his works shows great variety. All this was very great. Some were historical, some were satirical. Like the his arrangement of Paris is a pastoral masque. Edward First was a chronicle history. King David and the Fairy Bathsheba was a miracle play, and Old Wives' Tale was a satirical drama. So his last one is the most memorable play, and this play seems to be forecast of the Milton's commerce. The absurdities and the impossibilities of romantic drama are pleasantly included in it. Now, one thing to be noted that although they were very well acquainted with the rules of the drama writing, and they were knowing the rules of the Aristotle, but these people were not writing in the classical way. They were writing in a romantic way. They were writing romantic dramas without following the rules of Aristotle, and because they were serving the Elizabethan audience, they wanted to entertain Elizabethan audience. They were not very fond of those hard and fast rules of Aristotle about the tragedy, writing tragedy. Now, this person, this person who was George Peele. George Peele has written a play called A Farewell to Arms. George Peele has written Farewell to Arms, you can see here. And this farewell to the arms was the most anthologized, and also Farewell to Arms was the title of the Ernest Hemingway's novel Farewell to Arms. So there is one similarity. And now we will talk about Robert Greene. So Robert Greene has been a scholar of both Oxford and Cambridge universities, and he also traveled widely over Europe. He was deeply indebted to Italian authors. His plays are comical history of Alphonsus, King of Aragon, A Looking Glass for London and England, the history of Orlando Furioso, the honourable history of Friar Bacon and Friar Bungie, and the history of James the Fourth. Now, his Alphonsus seems to be an imitation of Marlowe's Tamburlaine. So, he has written this in the fashion of Christopher Marlowe's Tamburlaine. He has written James Fourth is not a chronicle play, but it was a story of a king. Then his Friar Bacon is a sort of idyllic romance. Green developed a regular plot expressing human feelings. He was a great person, and he has written great works. He was a very notorious professional pamphleteer. He has written growth worth of uh, he has written Grot worth of wit brought with millions of repentance, in which he has criticized William Shakespeare, that William Shakespeare is plagiarism, engaged in plagiarism. He is copying great writers of the period like that, and he is comparing William Shakespeare with the upstart crow. So like that. Now he was using various themes. This Robert Greene, he was writing about love, fairy tales, history, magic, jokes, all those things. Then he also collaborated with Thomas Lodge into Looking Glass for London and England. He was 6 years senior from Shakespeare, and the first mention of Shakespeare was we find in 1592 by that, where he attacked the Shakespeare, and he compared him as a upstart crow beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in the player's hide spots Shakespeare as a threat to educated university men like himself in growth worth of wit. So he finds Shakespeare as a threat to them in growth worth of wit. Now all these university were living very loose kind of life, very aristocratic life, very immoral life, and they were engaged in many uh, immoral activities, and so they were suffering from many controversies also, and their career ended in some very drastic way, like this his career. Robert Greene also ended his career in a very drastic way. He singed in a debauchery, in a poverty, and he died, and his death was not well known to others. Now we will talk about, this is the pamphlet, Green Grots worth of wit brought with millions of repentance. Now we will talk about Thomas Lodge. Thomas Lodge. He was educated from Oxford, and he was a great writer. He was educated at Oxford, and he studied his law. He was not. He was, although he studied law, he did not wanted to become a lawyer. He wanted to become an actor. So he came to London to pursue this dramatic career, and he has written some voluminous pamphlets, and when he was writing pamphlets, he came to know about the Stephen Gossen's uh, School of Abuse. Stephen Gossen was a writer, and he has written School of Abuses, in which he condemned the stage play during the Elizabethan age. He condemned poetry, and he was condemning music and all those things. So this Lodge was very fond of poetry and fond of dramatic art. So he wrote a kind of a defense to all these Stephen Gossens, and he has written this. A defense of poetry, music, and stage play. And he was criticized for that. Then he collaborated with Shakespeare in Henry VI also, and he has written Wounds of Civil War also. So these are his important work: The Wounds of Civil War, A Looking Glass for London and England, Rosalind. This Thomas Law's Rosalind was the play which inspired Shakespeare to write As You Like It. So these points are important, that from which play Shakespeare is inspired. So the Rosalind inspired Shakespeare to write As You Like It. Now, If Shadow, the life and the death of William Langbeard, A Treatise of the Plague, A Defense of Poetry, Music and Stage Play. Now we will talk about Thomas Nash. Thomas Nash is considered the greatest of the English Elizabethan pamphleteers. He was also a playwright, poet, satirist. He was son of person William Nash and Margaret. So, he has written, he was graduated from Cambridge, London, and he has written Unfortunate Traveller. Unfortunate Traveller, here you can see his important works are Summer Last Will, The Terror of the Night, The Unfortunate Traveller, The Christ Tears Over Jerusalem, Dido, Queen of Carthage, The Isle of Dog. So here this Unfortunate Traveller was a forerunner of the novel form. It is considered the pioneer in the field of drama, Unfortunate Traveller. Now he has written Summer, Last Will, and the Testament also. It was his only surviving play. And he was close friend with Robert Greene. He collaborated with Marlowe also. And Greene and Nash credited with the launching an English periodical press, earliest form of journalism, serial writing. Now he shared a pattern with Shakespeare. So this pattern of Thomas Law's pattern was Earl of Southampton, and Shakespeare pattern was also Earl of Southampton. And he helped Shakespeare. Thomas Nash helped Shakespeare with Henry IV. He has written. It is said that he has written first part of the Henry IV, and he was imprisoned for short period for writing Christ Tears over Jerusalem. Elizabethan society was very free and secular, but it was not secular, so much secular that anybody could write about the Jesus Christ. So he was imprisoned for that. Now he was also persecuted for this play, satirical play, and he had to go to jail with along with Ben Jonson for that. Now you can see some spelling mistakes, but these spelling mistakes are not by me. These are mistakes because these are written in the obsolete English, old English. So these spelling are like that only. Now we will discuss Thomas Kidd. Thomas Kidd was a great writer, and he was a playwright. He has written Spanish tragedy, and he is one of the most important figure in the development of Elizabethan drama. He is credited with written first English revenge tragedy, Spanish tragedy. And one thing is important to note: he was not a university graduate, but he is included in this group because of his contribution to drama and because of his writing style. So Sampson say he was the first English dramatist to discover the bearing up episode and dramatic moment upon the character. And his Spanish tragedy is still considered to be very famous tragedy. It is believed that he wrote a play, Hamlet also, which has been lost now. And his other plays are Tragedy of Soliman and Perseda, Geronimo, and Apology for Actors. His importance in the group of university which is next only to Marlowe. He is very important, and he is also very much influential. He also influenced many Jacobean writers who were writing revenge tragedy. Now these university were very much influenced by Roman playwright Seneca, and they were imitating Seneca. They have studied Seneca in their university days. A successful player and playwright, he left behind a pastoral, a romantic tragedy, a chronicle tragedy, a chronicle history, and all those things. Now we will talk about Christopher Marlowe. He is an outstanding figure among all those university writes. He's a phenomenal person and great writer. And Christopher Marlowe, his importance is great among all these writers. And he was born at Canterbury, educated at Oxford. He was an Oxford graduate, and he was born in the same year as Shakespeare. He was son of a respectable tradesman, businessman, and he was attached to the Lord Admiral's players. Now he was leading a very aristocratic life. He was wearing a lot of jewelries, and he worked as a spy also. He traveled much, and his travels gave him a lot of knowledge, and he used those knowledge in writing dramas. And he had a varied interest. He was interested in geography, astronomy, philosophy. He was a person of flamboyancy. He was a flamboyant. His dressing style was great. He was using lots of jewelry, which was the cause of envy to many uh, elizabethans of that day. And he had no bent for comedy. He disliked comedy. He did not use comedy at all. And so he was a combination of inquiring mind and desolate life. Although his life was desolate, he was a genius, and he was also charged with atheism. People called him atheist and he immoral. And he was killed in a drunken brawl. There was a one quarrel and one drunken battle and brawl in the tavern of London. And at the age of 29, he was killed in 1593. And it is said that since he died, he was this enabled him to avoid impending arrest. Otherwise he could be arrested because of his immoral acts, like he was a spy. And some people call that he was not killed in a brawl, but he was assassinated. He was murdered. Some people also compare him with Shakespeare and says that if there was no Marlowe, there was no Shakespeare. And some people also call that Marlowe is Shakespeare and Shakespeare is Marlowe. Now written plays only for 5 years, and he was a friend of Nash and Green, and he shares lodging with Thomas Kidd. He was living with Thomas Kidd. He was a friend to Thomas Kidd and Walter Raleigh. And he has written Tomberline. His works are like important works are tragic history of Dr. Faustus, Tomberline the Great, Jew of Malta, Edward II, the Massacre at Paris, and Dido, Queen of Carthage. So these are his famous work. Now Tomberline the Great was a new kind of tragedy. It was a rise of shepherds to the generalship and the command of the Mongol Empire, one of the first great characters in the English drama. Now he has written Edward II, in which dramatic tension between the duty and the desire is there. Then there is a Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus was a man quest for knowledge. It was a play where a man is searching for knowledge, for demonic power, and he was critical of classical learning. He was this Dr. Faustus was termed as the first tragic hero to be uh, thorough intellectual torment. He gone through intellectual torment. Now, Marlowe has used full potential of the blank verse. He was writing in blank verse, and his blank verse was called Marlowe Mighty Lines. Now, Now, his importance can be judged from the opinion of the many critics that Marlowe was a model for Shakespeare. Had there been no Marlowe, there would have been no Shakespeare. Shakespeare learned from Marlowe at least two major dramatic techniques, his theory of tragedy and his blank verse. And he learned the concept of tragic hero from Marlowe and the spiritual conflict through which the heroes passes from Marlowe, Dr. Faustus, and King Edward II. Now, this Marlowe's play, Jew of Malta, inspired Shakespeare to write Merchant of Venice. and his history play Edward II inspired Shakespeare to write many historical plays. So Shakespeare had many influence on all these university wits, and so this was a detailed video and detailed discussion on university wits. I hope you like this video, or if you found this video very useful, then please share it with your friends. Thank you for watching.